So the idea of having one day this opportunity for a mom who's sitting in an office with their child being diagnosed with food allergies to say, hey, here's the medical side, here is the mental health element. I mean, it would have changed everything.
Let's bring the psychologist in. Let's continue this integrated care model that we see in other domains. There's no reason it shouldn't be an allergy.
I feel often almost using the word like callous, like what a shame that I'm having to become so callous. But I really like the framing it of resiliency and growth. That's so helpful.
Hi.
Hello,
And welcome to EpiPod. Sarah is a mom to 2 little boys with food allergies.
And Danielle has navigated life-threatening allergies her entire life.
Living with an invisible health condition is so isolating.
The fear and the anxiety.
Trying to cover it up so you don't affect anybody else.
Especially your kids. Sound familiar?
Join us on the couch and take a load off with people who just get it.
We're so glad you're here. Welcome back to EpiPod, presented by Lorissa's Kitchen.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Danielle. We are talking about mental health today in the food allergy space, which is a big old conversation.
And we have our first guest.
I know, I'm so excited.
So exciting. She's an actual professional who can actually speak to this, but more so, she has an anaphylactic, life-threatening allergy as well. So kind of merging the two worlds, which we don't get a lot of.
No, and I think is desperately needed in the food allergy space. So definitely excited to talk to her. We'll definitely introduce her here in a second. But just given the fact that we're talking about mental health, and I know that this past 6 months, at least for you, has been a little bit hard in that way. Where are you right now? How are you feeling today?
Yeah, honestly, really good. Like I feel like a lot of the times I can't say that, but I'm doing really, really well, night and day from where I was at from January to basically the beginning of May. Sometimes somewhere around mid-May, I sort of flipped back over slowly, and I stopped having to track like which doses do I have some level of a panic attack from. Now I'm just recording like which ones I do. And so far I haven't in a really long time. Those news stories shattered me to my core. I was not okay after January and all of the news that came out, multiple news stories. And I literally texted my best friend being like, I feel like I'm back. Like I feel like I'm back to where I was in the fall, where I was updosing every week. And I feel like I am able to doggy paddle and keep my head above water, both with treatment and with allergy life. And it's not just like my whole life is treatment.
Yeah.
I can live my life, and treatment is this part of it in the morning. And it's part of the thing that's woven in.
It just goes to show that like sometimes time really is not the only factor, because obviously you're doing therapy.
I was going to say, I think it was a lot of money in therapy bills.
Yes, but also like sometimes things do just take time.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
And you've gotten over the hump, and I think that is really hopeful for a lot of people who are listening.
I sent that text and then open up my phone. The next time I open up my phone is when the news of the DJ who had an anaphylactic reaction, and it's like showing him
giving himself the EpiPen.
He thought he was going to die.
Yeah.
And so I literally sobbed. I just was journaling and crying. Like if you look at my journal, it's like tear stained, because I'm like, I made it. I clawed my way out of the pit. I'm going to cry. Why can't we have a normal episode where we don't cry? I truly feel like I clawed my way out the whole past 6 months. And the day that I feel like I can finally say I'm back, I'm feeling shattered again. And that's just to say, like, media really affects me. It has, even when I was a kid, like I couldn't watch scary movies. Like media has always really affected me, but I was like, are you kidding me? Like I can't do another 6 months right now. Like I can't do that. And I talked about it with my therapist, and I'm proud to say, like, I had one day where I was feeling like, oh shoot, here comes the panic attack as I swallowed my dose. And by the time I made it over to my desk, which is where I sit after I finish, swishing water around my mouth and making the allergen go away, I was back to normal. So it literally was one day instead of 6 months of sorting myself out. And I think mental health is, you're always riding the wave. Like, it is never static. You're not like, okay, I've arrived. And the next day you may not be back the where you were. But I'm so proud of myself. And I've never regretted the therapy bills, but I really don't regret. I can tangibly see on my calendar how much more equipped I am to handle the things that trigger me the most.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I updosed.
So great. Yay.
I updosed, which we talked about last time. And I'm updosing again, like normally, AKA every week or every other week, not 6 months, every 6 months.
Yeah. Progress.
Yeah. So I was able to updose after that as well. And yeah.
That's amazing.
So that's where I'm at. It's just such a good reminder that it's up and down, but
always
so much better at getting back up now.
That's great.
Yeah.
So
How
glad
about
to hear
you?
it. Yeah. You talk about riding the wave. I feel like I am drowning in the wave. I've been struggling, like today in particular. I woke up thinking like, wow, well, okay. Today, it's a good thing we're talking about mental health. I'm going to be a mess. But I'm going to try to hold it together. I don't even think it's all allergy related. Of course, that always like compounds things. Yeah. You know, like there's always that element or those things that you have to do. And, you know, it just takes up mental brain space. But I think, you know, peeling back the curtain a little bit, not just like allergy life, you know, I work a full-time job. I have 2 little boys who are extremely active and just, you know, require a lot, even outside of allergies. Like they're just go all the time. They're never chill.
And it's summer. So it's like double not chill.
Right. Our schedule is different. And, you know, than just normal life stuff, right? I mean, you know, Mark is dealing with things, or we have family, you know, extended family things going on, just normal house chores, you know, appointments to schedule. I feel like I'm at a point where I think we talked last time about like, you know, the spinning plates, or like you're balancing plates and like at some point it's going to fall. And I feel very close to like things are going to crash and burn. I talked with one of my friends who's actually a food allergy mom, and she actually had like a point, I think she said it was last year before we really got close, where she suffered like a borderline, I think, heart attack. I mean, not
cardiac event.
Yeah. Yes.
From stress?
From stress.
Wow.
And that has like not left my mind since she said that. Like, I have to be here for my kids, you know, like they need me more than like my job needs me, more than anything else needs me.
I was going to say the podcast too. Yeah. Throw it out the window. This is our last episode. Just kidding. Just kidding.
No, I know I need to, I've never been good at saying no to things. I've never been good at, you know, putting something down even for a moment to take a breath. And I think I have thought that I've gotten better at it, and maybe I have, but then everything just keeps loading on top of each other, and I keep taking on more. It's partially my fault. And speaking of therapy, I am determined. Like I really don't feel like I can let it go any longer. Like I do feel like I need help. And that is really hard for me to say, because I think there's this, I still fall under, even though I don't feel it about other people, I still have this like weird stigma in my head that like, if I ask for help, then I'm not strong enough. And, I think I need help, you know, I think I need somebody to help talk me through like, okay, what can I put down? Like, Sarah, you have to breathe. Like you have to live your life, and you're not right now because you're just surviving it. And so, I don't know what it was. I think I have a big work project right now, and I'm kind of stressing about that. And it just like hit me all at once this morning. And I was like, I have to do something. So anyway, that's where I'm at.
I'm so sorry that you feel like you're drowning.
Yeah.
There is no one who I look up to the way I look up to you. Like you are handling so much, and I've always thought like, how does she handle it all? Yeah. And most of the time, like you are juggling at 300 speed. Yeah. I don't know how you like give somebody else grace, but you need the most grace possible. Like you are the best of us. You are the best person that I know. I don't know what it is, how to convey it to you, but you deserve so much grace from yourself.
Thank you. And then, even like hearing that, I'm like, I'm a disappointment now, you know? But like, that's where my brain is, which is like, and I know logically that is not true. Like that is not a factual thing that is coming out of my mouth. Like, but the fact that my brain is programmed to think that way means that I do need somebody to give me tools to get me through that.
Totally. Like that is the thought pattern. Like that is where like you are stuck in that. And it doesn't matter what anybody says or how many times you journal about it or how many yoga classes you go to. Yeah, it definitely is going to take something stronger. So, I'm putting it in my calendar. I'm going to keep you to it. I'm going to ask you in a month.
Okay.
Like, when's your first appointment? In terms of stigma, I need that. I was born in 91 and therapy was for crazy people. That's the way that I grew up. Like not just like family, just in general, media.
Yep.
You never saw it talked about as in a positive light or helping somebody who you saw yourself in. It was like Silence of the Lambs vibes. Like literally only deeply disturbed people could need a doctor to help them sort out what's happening up here. And I genuinely think that if I didn't go through OIT, where my allergist was like, you need more support. And he said that at the beginning, even before I started having issues. So like in terms of like good side of allergies, if nothing else, it forced me to needing to find a therapist who could support me and who understood what I was going through and to give me new tactics and ways of dealing with this, changing my thinking patterns, etc. And a lot of them, I was like, I'm going to a food allergy anxiety therapist. And it was like, because that made me feel, even though I never looked down on anybody who went to therapy. I went to college in California. Everybody had a therapist, okay? But I never looked down on anybody who did, but the stigma is so intense and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But really it was such a good gateway for me. Like it was such a good gateway drug. Like we were talking about like things had nothing to do with allergies more than we were talking about allergies.
Yeah.
So it's been so healing that I want that for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm motivated now by just like feeling like I kind of dipped too low. And then also I would love the accountability. So please hold me accountable there. And something you said about your allergist sort of introducing the idea of like, hey, Danielle, you need therapy, kind of brings us in really good to our guest.
Alyssa.
So now we want to tell you a little bit about one of our favorite snacks, LK Meat Snacks. Lorissa, the founder, has a mission that's simple but strong: to provide you with meat snacks certified free from the top 9 allergens.
All products are made with 0 sugar and either grass-fed and finished beef or free-range chicken or turkey. That tastes awesome.
With her own family that lives with food allergies, it's extremely personal for her, and she ensures that the product has intense quality control processes, rigorous certifications, and a top-notch food advisory board, so you can have confidence in what you're eating. And as we both know, Danielle, like having confidence in a food, having that trust in a snack that you're giving to yourself or your family, it is everything.
Okay, here's the thing. I don't trust anybody. I don't trust anybody to make my food except for me or somebody who's a food allergy mom.
Yep.
And this checks.
Yep. Lorissa is a food allergy mom.
I love it. So if you want all of the flavor without any of the fear, grab some LK Meat Snacks and snack fearlessly at Amazon or lorissaskitchen.com. That's LORISSAS kitchen.com.
And Danielle, I love that they are in Sprouts now because first of all, our Sprouts that I go to is right across the street from Target. So I'm always like, okay, I need an extra allergy-friendly thing at Sprouts. And now they have Lorissa's Kitchen, so adding to cart.
I'm obsessed. I'm not really into the waiting for things to show up on my front doorstep. When I want it now, and now we can go to Sprouts. Alyssa is a 26-year-old graduate student in Chicago, Illinois, building the food allergy blog that she wished she could have followed when she was growing up. With a laundry list of allergies herself, Alyssa founded All Things Allergies in 2019 to highlight the unique struggles that young adults face navigating their severe food allergies. As a fourth-year doctoral student in clinical psychology, Alyssa has been vocal about the way allergies have impacted both her physical health and her mental health, especially since she's begun tackling food challenges, flying internationally, and making sense of her past medical traumas. Outside of her professional life, Alyssa enjoys traveling, group workout classes, wedding planning, and saving room for dessert, even with her life-threatening peanut allergy. Welcome, Alyssa!
Welcome. So glad to have you. So we talk all the time, Danielle, about the fact that we are not MDs.
Right.
We do not have a doctor's license.
Right. We're not allergists. We're not therapists. We're just girls.
Right. And the fact that, while we trust our allergists extremely, sometimes if they are not a person who suffers with allergies themselves, or they're not a parent to someone with allergies, there's a perspective that's missing, which is why I'm really excited to talk to Alyssa today, because not only are you someone who lives with food allergies like Danielle, but you also are getting your doctorate, right? I mean, you are studying the almost psychology of living with food allergies and what that means. So I'm really excited to hear more about your research and just how your perspective kind of feeds into that or helps your research along.
That gave me full body chills. I've never met anybody who has both the professional side of it and who lives with it. And I always say to Sarah, I don't want to go to a gynecologist unless they have one too. I don't want to go to a man. So it's funny with allergies and on the mental health side of allergies, I don't want to go to somebody who doesn't get it, but not a lot of them do firsthand.
Right. So diving right in, tell us a little bit about your research, what exactly you are doing day to day, and just kind of the general subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm doing my doctorate in clinical psychology, but I have a focus in health psychology. So that is kind of looking at that integration of physical health with mental health. And so that obviously is really getting into this food allergy space. And I got into this because I had food allergies myself. I had my first allergic reaction when I was in first grade, and that day changed the trajectory of my life. That, I think, kicked off this career in mental health, even if I didn't know it at that point. So now, kind of fast forward to today, I'm actually this week wrapping up my third year. I'm going into my fourth year of the program. And we're kind of heavy in dissertation right now. So a lot of my classes are over with, but going into dissertation mode. And so at the kind of place right now where my topic is food allergy related, but more specifically looking at the physiological and the psychological similarities between anaphylaxis and anxiety. So I see so often, and this was my personal experience, this is what kind of inspired me to make this my topic. But so many people saying, I can't tell if, is my throat scratchy? Am I having difficulty breathing because I'm anxious? Is it because I'm having an allergic reaction? And I went through the majority of my life not being able to make that distinction, but thinking that I was the only person. And that is not the case, but it is not really reflected in the literature yet. Doing my literature review, I was able to see, few different circumstances in which anaphylaxis, not necessarily from food allergy though, anaphylaxis was kind of conflated with anxiety, but there's no one out there, there's no specific literature that kind of highlights that this is an issue for our community. And so just wanting to put one small piece of work out there that says, hey, this is a real issue, this is something that we need to look out for in the ER and all sorts of things, because we see this in non-cardiac chest pain. So we see people very frequently going to the ER for thinking they're having a heart attack, thinking that they're having some sort of other medical emergency, but ends up being anxiety. And so this isn't a new concept, but it hasn't really been explored in the context of food allergy anaphylaxis yet. And so wanting to put some literature out there that reflects this experience that I know, Danielle, you can relate to, and Sarah, I'm sure with your boys as well. So
Yeah, I mean, like food challenges and now doing OAT every morning, like I feel like you are reading straight out of the inside of my brain, where it's just like, oh my gosh, like before I do an up dose, which I'm doing later this week, but even at the last one, I'm like, okay, like where is my state of body? Like before I even put the allergen in my mouth, I feel like there is a tennis ball in my throat. Like I do have impending doom. Like my chest hurts. I can't think straight. Like, so I'm just having to scan like, all right, this is our baseline. Not when the doctor comes in right after I've swallowed it and they're like, how are you feeling? If I tell them this list of symptoms, they're going to be like, holy cow, like, oh no. So yeah, it's really confusing. And that's something that a feedback that I get from people in my comments and DMs all the time, trying to understand their children and what their children are going through, like asking what it feels like and like how do you know that's not anxiety? All of us are thinking that. That's crazy that there's no literature out there for that.
There's not a lot, and it's starting to move in that direction, but it really is, how do we tell the difference? Like we look at the symptoms of anaphylaxis and we look at the symptoms of anxiety, and they, more specifically like a panic attack, and they just completely mirror each other.
Totally. Like you look at the bullet points and it's like, they're exactly the same. Like there's not a lot on either one that's like, oh, that is clearly an EpiPen situation, or like, oh no, like, but you need to box breathe or something. Can I ask, like, when you are doing this research and you are spending a lot of your day in literature, in doing your dissertation now, does that spike your anxiety? Like, is it harder for you to eat out and travel, spending so much time like 2 feet planted, and it's like, I don't know, like it's even up to your earlobes, like this is your whole day probably.
Yes, and that's such a great question, and that is honestly a conversation that I had with my personal therapist before I decided to make this my topic. Because in school we can take our topics in any direction. It didn't have to be food allergy, it didn't have to be health psychology, but this was something that I related to so personally. And they say, you're going to be spending so many hours and days and weeks of your life doing this. You want it to be something you're passionate about, but then at the same time, is this something that's going to be traumatizing or triggering for you?
Yeah.
And I felt like going into it, I knew that I needed to be cognizant of that, that I needed to recognize kind of what my boundaries were, and what kind of like safeguards I needed to prepare for myself. The majority of the time I think I've been okay, because I have been able to go through so much processing and healing with my own therapist and get to a place where it almost feels, we think about it, so there's post-traumatic stress and then we have post-traumatic growth as well, which isn't talked about quite as much. But thinking about resiliency after trauma, that I see myself healing through this process of being able to take my experience and like have something good come out of it, that it does feel therapeutic, like in that sense.
You talked about full body chills. I just got it with post-traumatic growth. I don't think I've ever heard that phrase before.
I have never heard that phrase before.
But I absolutely love that. I didn't mean to interrupt, Alyssa, but I'm like, if I don't save that in my brain, like download it right now, I don't want to forget it. Like, it felt that important to hear those words come out of your mouth, because I feel that. Like, I have grown significantly each time we've dealt with something traumatic in the food allergy space. Yes, there's still stress and trauma from it, but I do feel like I'm slowly but surely getting stronger and more able to handle those situations.
Yeah, I feel often almost using the word like callous, like what a shame that I'm having to become so callous. But I really like the framing it of resiliency and growth. That's so helpful.
Yeah, and throughout my literature review, there was so much of this focus on post-traumatic stress, because we think about post-traumatic stress as medical trauma, and I like to say this as much as I can, the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's like the purple book. They call it the like psychology Bible, and has all the mental health conditions in it. And under a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder requires this criterion A traumatic event. And they have it listed on the page in print, anaphylactic shock, as an example of medical trauma.
Wow.
Which makes the fact that there's so little literature out there reflecting anaphylactic shock that much more surprising to me, because it's literally written right there in the book. But there is when I was going through the literature review, so much of talking about PTSD, my supervisor, my dissertation chair was like, we haven't talked about post-traumatic growth at all. I think that would be meaningful to put in there, because there is this piece of, growing and having resiliency come out of an event like that, which I think is just so meaningful. And Sarah, like you said, not talked about at all. Never hear that.
So one thing I was thinking about when you were talking about your research and the fact that there's not a lot of it out there right now, do you think doing your research and having these allergists that are out there talking with patients and families all the time, do you think it's going to help them better understand their patients? Because I think a lot about just being a woman, we almost sort of like gaslight ourselves sometimes, like, why am I so upset about this? I shouldn't be feeling this bad. Or like, you're feeling a symptom and you kind of put it away, tuck it away, because you're like, I got to get through it, or maybe that's not really the case, and so we're already predispositioned for that sort of idea, or like the way that we are. And then you have this very confusing idea of like anaphylaxis and a panic attack mirroring each other, as you know very well, Danielle. And I feel like if an allergist does not understand that fully, like if there's not actual research, which they hang their hat on all the time, right? They're like, well, don't do this, or don't be worried about this unless there's research. Yeah. Well, like now, Alyssa, you're doing that research. Like, do you think it's going to help patients in that way?
So that is the hope. The hope is to because like I said, you're having that literature base, that you're looking for something to be peer reviewed, to point to give some legitimacy to what you're talking about. And I know that this is legitimate because I feel this in my experience. And Danielle, I'm sure you can feel the same way, but we need something out there to refer back to that's empirically validated and peer reviewed in that way. But more than even having the allergists, start to understand their patients more, I also am hoping that it's a future of integrating psychologists and therapists or social workers into allergy practices.
Yeah.
So that they both can be working side by side, that the allergist doesn't need to be the expert in anxiety and in allergy, that we can have both of these team members there working alongside one another.
Oh,
that is
preach.
so, yeah, no, that is so valid.
Yeah, it makes me want to cry thinking about it, because I'm already emotional. As I mentioned, this is like mental health topic is coming at a really good time. I'm just having one of those days, like I'm struggling. Yeah. And I think back to that tidal wave moment that, I had in the doctor's office when they diagnosed Graham with these life-threatening food allergies, and I really felt alone. Like I really felt like, I know you're the doctor and you're telling me this information, but you are not receiving it in the way that I am. This is my child you're talking about. My life is forever changed. And there was really nothing more than, here is an EpiPen, avoid the food, good luck. Mm-hmm. And here I am just reeling, everything feels like it's caving in on me. And I have no resource. Or if I had one, it was maybe like, hey, here's a link to a Facebook group. Okay.
Even a worse idea.
Yes. Like I would never want to do that in the first place. I think a lot of people, that isn't their vibe. So like basically you gave me nothing. Mm-hmm. And so the idea of having one day this opportunity for a mom who's sitting in an office with their child being diagnosed with food allergies to say, hey, here's the medical side, here is the mental health element. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would have changed everything.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. Like my allergist, Dr. Silvers, is the most kind. Like whenever I've had like basically a panic attack in the office, like when I went from the solution to Bomba, I was not well. Like he was almost, he was like, I didn't really know if you were actually going to end up being able to updose. Like I was in such a state, and he is so good and so calm and so kind. But I think that's so valid. Like in one breath, I'm like, allergists don't get it because they're not in my shoes. Like they've never wondered, like, is this anaphylaxis or is this anxiety that is valid, but anxiety, like they need to understand this. And then on the other hand, okay, this is a very odd metaphor, but
You know, I've never gotten lip filler, first of all. But you know when you're getting lip filler, you're like not going to be going to somebody who like also does this and also does that and also like you don't want a jack of all trades, somebody who's going to be like massively altering your appearance. Right. You want somebody who does that day in and day out. Like I just want the lip girl. Okay. Again, never even had Botox. But like you want somebody who specializes. So in the other breath, I'm like, I just want somebody who does lip filler all day. I don't want somebody who does every single med spa procedure ever, you know? So yeah, it's like I want allergists to understand this piece, but also what if it was a hand in hand where they can just be the experts in allergists, which is what they are, not in being a psychologist or an expert in trauma, an expert in anxiety. Like the way that it was explained to me, not Dr. Silver's, quite the opposite of Dr. Silver's. The first allergist at the age of, I think it was 24 or 25, the only time I've ever been to the hospital for an accidental ingestion, the way that he described it to me did so much damage. Like it had been over 6 months since the incident, and from like seeing this doctor who did my first skin and blood test ever in my life, and the way that he described it to me, all of a sudden my life went from international travel, like kissing any boy who was cute at the country music festival, like this totally normal life, to hyper fixating on granular things. Like it just went tiny, and it was truly damaging the way that he approached it. So thinking about a world in which there's dual, like what you're describing is like
the dream.
Yeah.
How close are we, Alyssa, to something like that? I mean, I don't assume, you know, I'm not that naive to think that like, okay, every allergist is going to have a psychologist in their office. Like I understand that that's not really the case, but like how close are we to some sort of like blend there, like some sort of option for people who might need it, i.e. everyone?
Yes, exactly. I would say we might actually be closer than you think. Integrated medicine it's happening right now. It's happening in other clinics. It's just not happening in allergy yet. So this whole past year, I've been training in an integrated primary care office. So we have the primary care doctors who are there and they know the medicine. And then me and my team are the behavioral medicine specialists. And we consult and we can help with those physical health and mental health kind of conditions alongside of each other. We both can have our own expertise to help the patient in that way. We see this in primary care, we see this in pain, we see this in sleep, we see this in weight management, diet. So it's happening, psychology integrating into health. Again, it's we want more of it, but it's moving that way. But in an allergy, I think that's another part of like the more and more research and literature that we can get out there gives validity to we need psychologists in this space too. Allergy is the next space to bring these clinicians into, because we see that mental health professionals like outpatient is there. We have the food allergy counselor directory, which I shout out as much as I can, that allergists can refer their patients to, and kind of outside of their practice. But I think the next step then is let's bring the psychologist in. Let's continue this integrated care model that we see in other domains. There's no reason it shouldn't be an allergy. And there's, off the top of my head, 3 clinics that I'm aware of in the US that do follow this model, which of course is not a ton, but I think it's moving in the right direction, that there's the opportunity specifically working with psychologists sitting alongside kids as they do their OIT treatments. And like that is where we need it. We need somebody, the allergist sitting in the room right there and saying alongside the psychologist, one can talk about anaphylaxis, one can talk about allergy, and they can consult with one another. They can share their expertise with one another. So 3 clinics off the top of my head, there may be more, but I think it's moving there, but I want it 20 years ago, but it's exciting to see that it is moving in that direction.
Are you seeing, I'm coming at Allergy Life as kind of an observer, kind of. I mean, sometimes I feel like that's not even fair to say.
You're up to your earlobes as well, in a different way.
In a different way. But so have you looked at all at the perspective, not just from like the allergy patient who might be experiencing the symptoms, but the parent or the caregiver who might be trying to differentiate those symptoms in their loved one?
Absolutely. So my research specifically is focused on the young adult population, so I'm not particularly researching in caregivers, but in the literature, all of that is encompassed in the literature review, and the answer is absolutely yes, that we see repeatedly time and time again that anxiety and stress seen in caregivers of children with food allergies, as well as post an anaphylactic shock event, that they can see post-traumatic stress symptoms, increased anxiety, all of that as a consequence of anaphylaxis, not just for the person who experienced it, but for the caregiver who witnesses it. And we see that again reflected in the DSM, so this book that talks about the mental health conditions, that this criterion A trauma that constitutes a PTSD diagnosis does not just have to be something you experienced yourself, that you can witness this event, and that can qualify for PTSD or post-traumatic stress. So we know that it's not just the person experiencing it. We see time and time again in the literature that caregivers, they're experiencing, very similar symptoms as their kids or their loved ones are.
Yeah. I was thinking about, too, you said young adult. I don't know like when that starts, but my child, obviously not even close. He's 6. And then I have a 3-year-old as well. And my 6-year-old, it's funny because when they're so little and they're going through these different things that like food allergy impacts, I feel like they're in some ways when they're little, you can kind of protect them from things, or maybe they don't even have the social awareness to quite understand X, Y, or Z. But I will say as he's getting older, even just having his first year in kindergarten and being 6-year-old, his first big boy birthday party, going to more birthday parties, things like that, I can see it is changing for him. Like this food allergy life, I don't think he's struggling, thankfully. I know that I talk to people online whose kids are, even at a young age, but thankfully I think he wouldn't ever say to anyone that he's struggling. But I think I'm starting to see him more aware about how food allergy impacts him, or maybe how things aren't fair. Have you guys, or maybe just in general, not even necessarily your research, is there a lot of research out there in general about like how this is affecting young kids? I mean, you yourself, I guess, you've always had an allergy. So like, I guess I just want for him, I want to believe that he's going to be okay is I think the end of the question. I don't even know if there's a question, but like, is there research out there that is showing like there's help on the way for these kids? Like, is there anything we should be doing for these littles?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the research that kind of reflects what you're talking about is in the idea of like quality of life. And so there's even a food allergy quality of life scale that they can measure, like what is your quality of life and then what is your food allergy quality of life. And so we do see that in kids with food allergies, but even chronic disease or chronic illness as a whole, because we think about food allergy as being a chronic disease. It's something that you manage long term. That we do tend to see higher levels of anxiety, depression, and stress in people that manage such conditions. Quality of life can also be lower. It's associated as such. But a correlation does not mean to be that there's a causation, as well as it doesn't mean that you automatically are going to have these increased symptoms or these decreased quality of life just because you have a chronic disease or you have a food allergy. And you see that there are protective factors out there as well that can help sort of, kind of push you in that direction towards the resiliency and the growth rather than the stress and the distress and the anxiety that we find thinking patterns, the way that we kind of cope with things to be meaningful in improving quality of life, as well as so much therapeutic intervention has been found to be beneficial for this population, particularly CBT. I think most of the research out there is on that shows that is very effective for reframing some of those thoughts we have about food allergies, lowering some of that arousal, Danielle, that you were talking about, that hypervigilance. that even if having food allergies is associated or maybe predisposed to some of these other mental health conditions, that we do know there's protective factors, and we do know that there's treatments that have been found to be really effective for helping kids. And my personal opinion, I think the earlier you can start to learn some of those skills, those coping strategies, those thinking patterns, you can bring those with you the rest of your life. That you can always have those with you. And so that's something you can start even when your kids are little like that, make it age appropriate for them, but tools that they can carry throughout their life that can hopefully prevent some of those associations we see.
Yeah. I think about both of you dealing with nut allergies your entire life and how it's probably shaped you. And then you on top of that, Alyssa, doing all of this research. Yeah. What would you say, Alyssa, is the thing you wish you would have known? Like the thing that you've discovered within your research that you wish you could go back and tell young Alyssa?
Oh my goodness. That gave me chills. We're talking about chills. That gave me chills because that's kind of a quote that I put on my website or on my blog, is that like I'm building this blog to be the tool that I could have had growing up. And then specifically why a lot of my research and all things allergies is dedicated like towards the young adult population, because I felt like there was resources out there for kids and for caregivers of kids, and a lot of for allergists specifically, but this young adult population was kind of like a gap there, I felt, of things like dating and going away to college and eating on your own, like gaining that independence, like that sort of niche was missing a little bit. And thankfully, I think that area of the landscape is really growing, which is great to see. But that was so much of my focus because I wanted Alyssa 20 years ago to have this information, but I wanted people my age now to have it as well, because it's a very unique set of food allergy circumstances to have to navigate. But I think back then I would want Alyssa to know that like she is not the only one going through this. And it seems like a cliche answer because I think you always hear that like you're not alone, but you're not. And I really felt like I was having this experience in, ever since my first allergic reaction, but really in high school, where I really think it peaked after my second anaphylactic reaction, where I thought I was going crazy. I thought that I had this condition that nobody else in the world could understand, and that I was all this anxiety and not being able to tell the anaphylaxis from the anxiety, all this hypervigilance my body was experiencing, did not understand where this was coming from. And I wish I could go back and tell her, like, this is a real thing. I wish there would have been a resource to refer me to a mental health professional who was, knowledgeable about this. Somebody that I could reach out to and says, hey, we have food allergy anxiety too. We know that this is a real thing. 'Cause my family, we didn't know where to turn. We didn't know that other families were experiencing this. We just really felt like we were on our own in this. And if I would have been able to go back and just relate to somebody else's experience and know I wasn't making this up, I wasn't the only person going through this, being able to like put a label to what was going on, I think would have been so meaningful. And every time I get a message through All Things Allergies of somebody saying, hey, like I can relate to your experience, or I've never seen someone talk about this before, like that makes me feel so emotional, because I know how isolating that experience felt, and not being able to relate to other people who had food allergies that weren't experiencing the similar anxiety as me, or just people who didn't understand the food allergy experience at all. I wish I could go back and tell Alyssa then, like, just wait 10 years and you're going to be in this huge food allergy community. You're going to be talking on podcasts with other people who are experiencing this. Like, it felt then it was something I needed to hide. It was something I needed to be ashamed of. And now it's like, I'm going to go out and tell as many people as possible about this, so nobody else has to suffer through it in the way that I did.
That's how I feel.
I was going to say, I feel like I'm talking to like another Danielle.
You brought up triggering a little bit ago, and I feel like that's something that I am really dealing with. Like, smartphones, social
like,
media, and the way that anaphylactic reactions are reported on, and it's so sensationalized. Even when it's not sensationalized, even when I don't know what to do about the stinging. I don't know how to make it go away.
Let's just hope it stops.
Okay. But most recently, there was he put it out himself on his own social media, and then the entire allergy community put it out, where it was the musician, the DJ, who had an anaphylactic reaction on an airplane, and he put up a carousel showing himself with an oxygen machine up at the front of the plane, giving himself the EpiPen. And I understand if that happened to me, I would probably do the exact same thing. I would want the company to respond more than just like, oh, sorry, here's some airline miles or whatever. I would want to use it as an example, as it's not taken seriously. I would want other people to spread it around like wildfire so that it wouldn't happen to other people the way it happened to me. So I understand why it was posted, and I 100% would do the same, but I had to go off of social media. I muted you. Like, I didn't even talk about it. You did? No, you didn't?
I did not.
Oh, okay. Well, I literally muted every single allergy account, including you, for like 3 days, because every
good for you
single thing, even on my personal page, just every time, and people were messaging it to me, but seeing it on every story, and the opening part of the carousel was showing himself, giving himself the EpiPen. Mm-hmm. And it was so triggering. And I'm like, how am I supposed to dose? Like, I felt it's like you're shattered inside. At least that's the way how I feel. Can you talk a little bit about, like, whether it's research or coping, or is this something that other people deal with, and how you handle this as well? Because I feel like earlier in January there were quite a few stories involving deaths even. And so, and that really, really affected me, really affected my treatment. And I know I'm not the only one. People have reached out to be like, same. But yeah, like personally, how do you deal with that? And from the research side as well would be so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so tough. And it's like such a fine line, right? Like the whole purpose of the food allergy community is to like speak up, speak out, to advocate. And part of that is sharing these stories, but we know these stories to be a triggering of, traumatic events of our past, and to just be scary reminders. Like, we think about that as social media as a whole. Like, you're scrolling and you're just seeing all these like negative, scary things coming up all the time. And we know from a research base what a significant mental health impact social media has, regardless of the content that you're looking at. But specifically, if it's something that's so related to what your personal experience is, it's imagined to be even more impactful. And so I certainly echo that sentiment. I know that this past year, especially in the food allergy community, there's been a lot of just horrific and, terrible things that have happened and that have been brought to social media. And I think it's so important that we advocate for these things and that we share these things, because that's how we're going to get attention. In 2024, that's what you got to do to get the word out there.
Totally.
But I think exactly what you did, Danielle, to, set that boundary for yourself is what you have to do to make sure that you're taking care of your own mental health at the same time. That you recognize that it's feeling like a little bit too much for you. You recognize that you're feeling increased stress and feeling increased anxiety of setting a break for yourself, whether it's muting people, whether it's taking a social media break, whether it's, you consume the content and then you allow yourself, time away from it. So however, that you're going to need to, I guess, to kind of cope with seeing all of that all the time, because our brains are not designed to be taking in all of this negative information. Like our minds are still kind of like a caveman, where we're only supposed to really know what's going on like in our little community and like our little group. Like, we're not designed to know the tragedies across the world. Our brains cannot comprehend that. And so to continuously see on social media or otherwise, like all of things really traumatic tragedies and events, on an emotional standpoint, we just can't process through all of it. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, when I've recognized that, particularly surrounding deaths, I think is seeing that and knowing that I need to take a break. And you have to know for yourself what that looks like when you need to take a step back. Like, how do I know that I'm feeling increased stress, or how do I know that I'm feeling increased anxiety? Sometimes we don't recognize that that's happening. It's like, okay, is my sleep quality decreasing? Am I feeling my heart rate going a little bit more during the day? Do I feel more easily irritable throughout the day? Like, how do I know that my anxiety is increasing? And then once I can recognize that about myself and say, okay, here's the triggers that I probably need to take a step back from. And social media certainly being one of those. But such a fine line. Like, I'm so grateful that people have been able to be brave enough and vulnerable enough to put their stories out there and to share and like find some good out of these horrible situations. But as the food allergy community, like, both of those things can be true, that those stories need to be out there, but we also need to take a break from them at some time too, and do what's best for ourselves.
What are your thoughts on medication specifically for food allergy sufferers? Like, I don't know. Part of me, whenever I've never been medicated for anxiety, but it's definitely always been a conversation, especially this past spring, where it's like, this is possibly too much for me to be carrying and trying to do treatment. But I don't know. Just like, so I don't have any firsthand experience with it, but is there any sort of knowledge you can share of do allergists recommend that, or is that something that's not as common? It's just like extraordinary circumstances and long term. I think that's what I've been fighting with, where I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Like, take this magic little pill and it's supposed to like take the edge off, but for my whole life, like, that seems ridiculous. Like, yeah.
And I don't know if I can speak to it specifically in a food allergy context, but what I can say is the research repeatedly shows that a combination of therapeutic intervention, so some sort of therapy with some sort of psychotropic medication, is repeatedly the most effective treatment. And so every single patient, client, everybody is individual with their own circumstances, but from what they have seen kind of in these like large meta-analyses is that the combination of the two tends to be the most effective for making progress and then maintaining progress. I can speak from just from my personal experience, is that I ended up being medicated for my largely food allergy anxiety around, let's say, probably 2020. So obviously there was a lot going on in 2020.
That's when mine got so noisy, where I was not operating the way I used to. Like, I used to be able to keep it below the surface, and then 2020, it bubbled.
Yes, exactly. And I think I was in a really similar situation, that lots of stuff was going on. I just moved to Chicago. I moved to Chicago in 2019, and then all of a sudden, all these things are going on in the world, and or a lot of things. And so I got myself established in therapy, and I was doing therapy for a while. And then that was a conversation I had with my personal therapist of, we say this combination as being most effective, and kind of thinking about it as being like a little boost. Like, I was struggling to make these cognitive shifts in my mind, that all of this hard work I was putting in therapy was not necessarily going to waste, but it wasn't like getting as much traction, because I was sort of like below this baseline of being able to like rationalize and kind of like challenge some of my thoughts, like my just like my system, like my vagus nerve, if we kind of think about like the fight or flight system, which is so dysregulated that I wasn't able to make any further progress of just like constantly in fight or flight. That part of your brain, in the back of your animal brain, we think about it as, is taking over. So the front of your brain that does like problem solving, abstract thinking, rational decision making is like turned off. And so if you're trying to go to therapy and this is the part of your brain that we're talking from, this fear-based part of your brain, we're never going to get any of the cognitive interventions going on up here. And so I was doing all this cognitive therapy, but I was living in a fight or flight kind of back of the brain. And so incorporating psychotropic medication just to get my vagus nerve, kind of get my fight or flight system calmed down a little bit, so I could start to rationalize and use more of like my prefrontal cortex for some of this like CBT therapy, so cognitive behavioral therapy, that really looks at the cognitions and the thoughts. That was the game changer for me. I think that in my personal situation, I needed that. Certainly not the case for everyone, but it also doesn't have to be a long-term solution. For some people, being able to regulate their system enough that they can engage in therapy more meaningfully, that can be something that they take those coping skills with them, and they don't need medication forever. Some people do, and it can be a personal choice. Sometimes you get to make that decision with your provider. So it's not always going to work for everyone, but I do think if it's something you're interested in, this is another way in which psychologists, psychiatrists, and allergists can consult with one another. This interdisciplinary teamwork that we're looking for is talking to a psychiatrist. Maybe they don't have all the expertise in food allergy. Let's get them talking so they can start to understand the specific needs of the patient.
That is, first, thank you so much for sharing so personally. Just from you to me, I feel like this was so worth it. This is so meaningful and helpful. So thank you for sharing that. I feel like that's exactly sort of what I'm going through. I'm investing a lot into CBT and a lot of time and a lot of money, just a lot in general. But I am definitely from back here still.
Yep.
And I can't seem to get off of that lasso. So that is really helpful to hear from your perspective that it was helpful. So thank you for sharing so personally.
Yes.
That means so much to me. And I mean, I think what's so overwhelming is when you're talking about like, okay, the allergist, the therapist who's hopefully specializing in food allergy, anxiety, and then a psychologist. And I feel like this is turning into a jigsaw puzzle. And like, can't they all just be interconnected, like under the same roof? Back to the like, that's a dream world. Yeah.
But can you imagine that one-stop shop? Like you go in and like you can go, and this is happening. We see this not in allergy yet, but these big integrated care teams is the dream. There's like a ton of barriers, insurance and healthcare and all these different things. So that's why it's not so easy to integrate, but there is models in which we do see this working, and that's the fight, I think, moving forward, is making that a reality in food allergy, and I think it's possible. I think we can get there.
I love it. Yeah, honestly, just talking to you makes me have a lot more hope. I'm good at keeping my head above the water and just being like, okay, sometimes you get pushed down and like you're gonna bob back up. Like, this is just what we have to deal with, and it's not going to change. Like, you're not going to bippity boppity boo your way out of an anaphylactic food allergen, much less multiple of them. But you bring so much hope and so much light to the conversation and like what you see the trends from. Yeah.
And I think, I mean, just as helpful as it was for you, it was for me, and I think it will be for EpiPod listeners. So, Alyssa, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. And like I said at the very beginning, the idea that you kind of come from both worlds, I think, is the most meaningful, and it's what most of us are always screaming, like, but you don't get it, but like, you get it. So thank you so much for being here. Also, last thing, thank you so much for sharing your relationship online, because that's something where like I feel like I'm in my Carrie Bradshaw era for like so many years now. It's like, when is it ever gonna end? And it's easy for somebody who's single to date and know what that looks like, but then you think about like, you have the voice in the back of your head of, will somebody, sure, they think I'm cute and they want to date me for a certain amount of months, or to go out to this concert and I can eat before, and that will just be a really pretty Band-Aid we can tie in a bow. But like, choosing somebody who is dealing with things that most people don't deal with long term, I'm like, oh my God, like that's going to be a really special human. Like, will he even exist? So seeing when you got engaged, I was like, oh my gosh, that's something I really needed to see. Like, there are these special people out there, and you can find that sort of a long-term partnership. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like that, I think actually try to always find like the blessings in food allergy. And I think one of them is you can tell how a partner is going to treat you based on how they treat your food allergies. And something about my fiance, Connor, he is
he will do anything to help protect me. We walk down the food out, or we walk into a grocery store, and like we'll be walking down the aisle that has the nuts, and he like pushes me over to the side. So I'm walking next to them, like little things like that. We're like, okay, if you know somebody is going to treat your allergies with such caution and understand to the best that they can, because they'll never fully understand your condition and what it's like to live inside your body. But they're making an effort or willing to do so. That's how you know that that's a good partner for you. Yeah. So maybe there's people out there that they find that that's not going to work for them. Great. Then that makes your decision a lot easier to get them out the door, right?
Totally. Oh my gosh. You are such a joy. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you guys so much. This was absolutely lovely. So thank you so much for having me. It was such a delight to speak with you about all this stuff. And thank you for advocating for mental health. We cannot do this enough. So thank you for being vulnerable and putting your situations out there as well.
Yes. And we, of course, will link you all your blog and your social media in our show notes. But where can people find you if they want to know more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at All Things Allergies, and then my website is allthingsallergies.com. So linked to my blog on there that has a bunch of blog posts about my food allergy and mental health experiences. Also linked a bunch of mental health resources as well that are specific to food allergy and just mental health in general. So those are all available, allthingsallergies.com.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you. I'm obsessed.
I know. I want to hang out with her in real life.
Obsessed with her. I wish that we lived in the same city so we could hang out. We could go to dinner.
I know.
At dinner.
Yes. You would, though, because she's found ways to do that.
I would. I'd be like, what if you take a bite first, Alyssa?
But I do. I love the fact that she has that lived experience. And then she also is such a badass. Like, she's so smart.
No, she is. She's so well-spoken. You can just tell, like, she emanates kindness, so sweet, so helpful, so genuine.
Yeah.
When I look at somebody who is like that, like in the real world, you know, when you just like meet a really special person, even you're like on the airplane or a friend of a friend at a birthday party, you're like, oh my gosh, like what a superstar, like the gemmiest of gems right there.
I know. I met her in DC when I was there a few months ago, and I immediately was like, I love her.
I love her. I do not know her, but I love her.
Yeah. She's just, like a calm person, but also very like sweet and educated. Yeah, informed. And I knew she was gonna. I'm patting myself on the back. I knew she would be a great guest.
When I meet those types of people, I'm always have like this little voice that's like, well, yeah, but they don't have to deal with they don't even know the what you are carrying on your back every single day for the past 32 years. Like they don't know. Of course they can be kind and light and genuine and informed, but she gets it
totally.
And I think just like how open she was, talking about anxiety medication, talking about therapy herself, talking about deciding to create the research that would be needed in mass for
that
the
next
future of
step
allergies.
To happen.
Nothing hits like it does when somebody gets it because they live it.
Yep.
Yeah. Such an inspiration.
Thank you.
Obsessed.
Thank you, Alyssa. And yes, we will definitely like tag her in our notes. Okay, moving straight along.
Yeah.
Question and answers? Yes, brought to you by InchBug, a label company. They are waterproof. They do not go anywhere. We love them so much. They're perfect for lunch boxes and really anything you need to label. And they have customizable labels for specific allergens. So perfect for the food allergy community.
You know why they have specific food allergy labels? Because their owner is a food allergy mom herself.
Yes, and you know what? She actually had the food allergy labels before she even knew she was an allergy mom.
Wow.
And then now she's like doubling down in that space, and she wants to be like a helpful resource for parents even more.
That's epic.
Yes. I love what she's doing. And she also sponsored Camp Bumblebee, which we'll talk more about like another episode, but that's the food allergy camp that I helped found. And it was the craziest thing. She signed on. We know each other through like a mutual friend, and she signed on to be a sponsor of Camp Bumblebee, a food allergy camp, before she became a food allergy mom. So it wasn't even just she had labels. She literally was like, yes, I think that would be.
And then she became a food allergy mom
the next week. after like basically signing the dotted line. Yeah.
That also is just so encouraging to know that people, like, the tides are changing, and that just because you don't have to live it to become aware. Like, that means the world that she was aware before.
I love it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you guys want to check out InchBug, we have a special code in the show notes. It's EpiPod 25, and it will give you a little more wiggle room in your cart.
And especially as we're going back to school, like everybody's needing those. Anyone starting kindergarten or daycare or whatever it may be, like these are perfect.
Refresh.
Yes.
Cool. Thanks, InchBug.
Thank you.
Okay. What would you do if your child has an allergic reaction to a previous safe food? Their age is 6. The family got vegan pizza that he has had 100 times from a local pizza place. Only known allergy is egg. He ate 2 slices of the pizza and went into a full anaphylactic reaction. I am already making moves on my end to try and prevent this from happening again. I'm just curious what the game plan would be for you if this were your house. What changes would you make? Do you tell his school about it? How do you recover or wind down as a family from a severe allergy event? I'm feeling so anxious, and I know that he is too. 6.
I know. I'm so sorry. That hits home for sure as a 6-year-old. So the school part, I feel like I need more information, but I'll speak from just what I think is going on.
Yeah.
Do you think the pizza was eaten at the school?
No.
Or no? Okay. So I always do, just starting there though, with the school thing, even if something didn't happen at school, I have a very like open conversation dialogue with my son's teacher. So, whenever he has had anything with treatment or any kind of reaction at home, I always let her know the next day, like, hey, we had this happen last night or this morning, just a heads up, just so
an extra eye.
Yes. The off chance that like something else happens or there's some sort of like, continued element of the reaction, like they are aware.
Or even if there's no continued element of the reaction, like if the child is just off, they're not themselves at school,
right?
They know, maybe they need
mental
some
health wise.
Yeah, they need some extra attention or some extra grace, or if they're not listening, however they are reacting to what they just went through.
Yeah. In terms of the pizza itself, I mean, that's terrifying. I think, all people are capable of mistakes, and certainly people that work at a pizza place who do not live food allergy life. I think, I don't know the situation here, but it just reinforces the idea that like every label, every time, or every time you eat a food, like you have to ask. So like, for example, we have our go-to places that we have discovered, like, okay, we can eat here. I will say even me, I have gotten probably too comfortable, meaning like I'll go into a restaurant and say, okay, we can have these, and these. And like, not every time do I say, okay, I always say the allergy, but I don't always say like, okay, so the sweet potatoes though, like they are not cooked in butter, like the recipe hasn't changed, I mean, there's so many elements that could have happened here. And like, that's why I don't like fault this mom at all, because I mean, anything can happen
so easily.
And again, like this is a familiar place you've been eating for forever. Just recently, I posted that Chick-fil-A added pea starch to their French fries in some select areas to test the crispiness, like to add
I know. I hate Chick-fil-A.
You're like rolling your eyes, but like, but that actually has been a safe spot for us, and we don't have a pea protein issue. But a lot of people have responded like, "Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I never would have thought." To like every single time check the ingredients of the or of the French fries, but like you have to, or you're kind of rolling the dice.
Or I mean, from my end, like retracing your steps of just being like, listen, we know mistakes happen, but like maybe he's developed a new allergy, so we need to know like I need a photo of every single thing. And also, do you think there could have been any sort of cross-contamination with something touching these ingredients if they're not new ingredients?
So you're saying post, this is what?
Post, like once the dust has settled a little bit, like having a sit down with the manager, explaining what happened.
Definitely.
Explaining like he very well could have gotten a new allergy or has something that we don't know what's going on. So it's really important. Like they could have just changed vegan cheese brands.
Right.
And like now that vegan cheese brand, while it's vegan, is produced in a place where there's egg. Like
Yes.
it could be 1,000 things, but I always want to get to the bottom. It's the mystery that really haunts me because it's like, okay, like, well, that's what it was. There was egg snuck in there. We did our best and egg snuck in there because of this new manufacturer of this new cheese, whatever it was. Or if it's everything is exactly the same and they're very confident that there's no cross-contamination, being able to show the allergist. And that way the allergist isn't trying to go off of like, okay, they could have developed a new allergy to all of these things. It's like, all right, we have wheat now to look for.
Yeah.
We have milk now to look for, like all of the things.
Yeah.
It's just like any amount of clues that you can get. That would always be like my first.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say between, you know, from now on knowing that like it freaking sucks and we shouldn't have to, but like maybe doubling down on asking about every single ingredient each time you order it. And then, yeah, having that like post sit down with the restaurant and then, yeah, having a conversation with the allergist to try to figure things out further.
What would you say from like a parent perspective though, of like, those are all tactical and things that we would do, but if her child is now learning to be afraid of food, how would you handle that with Graham?
You know, that's a hard question. I think I would look to, speaking of this episode, like I think I would really strongly consider some sort of therapy, some sort of like play therapy time for him to just like make sure that he's not struggling more than I know, or you know, before that, obviously I would sit down and talk with him myself, like really try to just casually understand like how he's feeling. I would probably take a lot of notes on like when we go out again to eat, like how is he acting? Is he in fact scared? And like what is he actually scared of? I think though, you know, as parents, we do the very best we can, but at the end of the day, like we do need help, you know, to help our kids. And so, you know, that's why there's a lot of experts on the internet that try to get you to buy a course or whatever else, because we're all looking for help. But really there are people trained to do that. So I think I would, you know, ultimately sit down, try to do some early diagnosing, just not real diagnosing, but like trying to understand where he's at, and then seriously considering getting him to talk with somebody to get through that hump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like in my own therapy journey, if you can even call it that, I felt like nobody would understand. I don't want to pay somebody a gazillion dollars to explain yet again for the gazillionth time in my life, like just, and then go through the exercise of like, are they going to believe me?
Yeah.
That a micro invisible to the eye amount could send me to the hospital. I'm not playing that game. I'm not paying for that either.
Yeah.
And that was always the story that I told myself. And it wasn't until the food allergy counselor's directory, I was like, oh, look, here are all these people organized by state who are specifically trained in severe food allergy, anxiety, and handling post-traumatic events, all of the things.
Yeah.
And yeah, I wish that I had obliterated that story a long time ago. So whether it's like for her or for her son, just knowing like there are people aside from just therapists, but like there are people who you won't have to explain this to them.
Yeah.
And like make them believe you.
It's great advice.
Yeah. Okay. Second question.
Hi, I am not sure if this was already addressed or asked, but I listened to the first several episodes. Love the podcast, by the way. Thank you. I was wondering if there was a long wait list for TIP and how long the timeline was from initiating contact with them to starting. My son's allergist recommended retesting him in 9 months when he's 3 years old, and then just quote unquote going from there. Just trying to see if I should be more proactive in the meantime and get some balls rolling now in case he continues to test as positive as he does. Thank you. So lots of questions in there, answering them quickly. So when we started the TIP program, there was like a long wait. So before I was even pregnant with Ethan, we considered TIP for Graham. So he was like little. Well, then there was a long wait. By the time we actually got in, Ethan was about to be born in like 2 weeks. And I
it's
knew like that was a no. Like we have to say no right now. And try again. So I had them like put me on the end of the list. Well, then by that time it was already a lot quicker. And we started the program, I guess, when Graham was like 3.5 is when we did testing. Active treatment was 4 years old. So Ethan would have been, they're like 2 years apart. I mean, he was still very little. So now though, I think now that they've opened up a second location in San Diego, I think there's hardly any wait.
Wow.
Like basically you can sign up and start pretty quickly.
Wow.
Because
Oh my
they've expanded.
gosh.
Yeah. So that's really good news. So to answer that first little question, as far as just commenting on the, like, he's supposed to get blood work again in 9 months. And the going from there thing, I was really big. One of the reasons that drew me to tip was because, well, first of all, Graham's numbers were like so high according to our allergist. He also didn't even start OIT until like 4 years old. So like we really felt like we didn't have an option. Also, he didn't do any OIT for milk or anything else. Like, and we trust our allergist, but we didn't have those opportunities to do anything about it. And I'm just the type of person that like, didn't feel like I wanted to sit around and do nothing. And I didn't want to be in that, like, say 25% or so that don't outgrow the nut allergies or the, well, no, wait, hold on. That's milk. So they say like 80% of milk and egg allergies are outgrown, but like 20% are not. And then, you know, only about 15 to 20% of nut allergies are outgrown. But like, I didn't want him having milk and egg to like wait around until he was 8 years old to discover that he's in the 20% of people that don't outgrow milk.
Totally.
Like, I don't want to do that, you know? So that's not what other people are going to feel and do themselves. And that's totally 100% okay. But that was like where I was coming at it from. I would say to this person, there are so many more options now than there were 5 years ago when we were looking into this. So I have had a positive experience with TIP. However, I would see like, what is your local allergist doing, or like what are other allergists doing in the area? Like if I turned back the clock and had met Dr. Silvers, who is doing OIT for these other allergens and getting people past bite-sized protection in some ways, with some allergens, I might not have done TIP.
Right.
So I think, you know, follow your gut, maybe look into it, have a consultation with TIP is what I would say. But 9 months isn't that long away. Maybe you do see what the blood work is, because it's going to be a whole lot cheaper than the TIP blood work, which is like $2,500. So I would get the cheap Quest Labs $30 copay blood work, see where you're at truly, and then kind of reevaluate what your options are locally, and then like, are you able to handle TIP, because it's a lot.
Do you, we were like, it's so expensive, like, it's so expensive, like all the time.
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable telling me like, what is a blood test? Like if he has blood work to do at their private labs, like what's your bill look like?
Yeah, it's $2,500.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it's once a year.
Shut up. You're buying him a horse every year.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that's not, the TIP fee is like $4,500 a year. That's not covered by insurance. So neither of those things are covered by insurance. And then we're not talking about travel to get there, hotel or Airbnb stay, airplanes, rental cars, activities, food.
Okay, so like, I'm sure you have like done the math, like all in over his entire experience. Like, we're talking like a college education.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's about $15,000 a year. And that's with our insurance covering the actual appointments. So they will cover us like going in for the appointment. That's just like the $100, whatever. It's
and
not
he's on like a 3-4 year plan?
3 years. Yeah.
But that's like pretty low. Like some kids are on 7-year plans.
Yeah, so it's very expensive.
Holy cannoli.
And we do have, like, to be fully transparent, like, number one, we both have jobs, so we're 2 working people, so that's, yes.
We just talked about, like, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Like, how are you juggling it?
Yeah, it's impossible. But then also, like, financially, like, we do have some help. Like, Mark's dad is, like, writing a check and sending it to us every once in a while to, like, help go towards Graham's treatment. Wow. Same with like my side, my mom's long-term boyfriend is
That is
chipping in and helping.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Like
my mother-in-law.
the whole family is like, we're going to get this kid the best shot at safety.
When he graduates the program, we're all going
like a resort.
Seriously, everybody's flying out. We're like staying at a resort. We already like are planning it now. So I'm like, he better freaking graduate.
Oh my God.
It is like, that's the thing. If you don't have that support, which I'm like, I wish everybody does and would have that, but if you don't, that's a really big factor to consider, because if we didn't have both like emotional support in it and also like some financial help, we maybe still could pull it off, but like it would not be as easy. It would be more stressful.
Yeah.
So that's that.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure like a lot of people who are like considering it are like, oh,
it's a big consideration. That's for
Dang.
sure. Yeah.
Okay. I can't wait to get up out of these seats so I can give you a hug because this has been a lot.
Yes. It's been a big episode, and it's long as usual, but also it was therapeutic just sitting here with you.
I'm
so
really glad.
Yeah.
We'll see y'all next Tuesday.
Yeah. See you next week.